A territory swap, that's what's now reportedly on the table. After years of bloodshed, after hundreds of thousands of casualties, after cities reduced to rubble, Russia is signaling it might give something back. But here's the catch. According to multiple diplomatic sources, Putin is willing to discuss returning some occupied territories to Ukraine. However, there's one massive exception. Donbas stays Russian. Donetsk, Luhansk, the industrial heartland of eastern Ukraine, the region where this conflict truly began back in 2014, that, according to reports, is non-negotiable. And tonight, peace talks that seem to be gaining momentum are hanging by a thread. Ukraine has repeatedly stated it will not accept any deal that legitimizes Russian occupation. Russia has repeatedly stated it will not withdraw from territories it claims to have annexed. So where does that leave us? Let's break down exactly what Putin is reportedly offering, why Donbas is the red line, and whether there's any realistic path to peace based on verified reports, official statements, and expert analysis. For months now, diplomatic efforts to end the Ukraine war have intensified. The Trump administration has made ending this conflict a priority. Envoys have traveled between capitals. Back-channel communications have reportedly increased. And for the first time in years, both sides have signaled some willingness to talk. But talking is not the same as agreeing. According to analysts who track Russian diplomatic behavior, Moscow's approach to negotiations follows a consistent pattern. Signal openness to appear reasonable, make demands that protect core interests. Blame the other side when talks stall. Wait for better conditions on the battlefield or in Western capitals. Understanding. This pattern is essential to understanding what's happening now. According to reports from diplomatic sources, Russia has indicated flexibility on certain occupied territories, areas that were captured after February 2022 and have proven difficult to hold or administer. But Donbas is different. The Donetsk and Luhansk regions have been partially under Russian-backed control since 2014. Russia formally recognized them as independent republics before the full-scale invasion. And in September 2022, Russia claimed to annex them entirely along with Zaporizhzhia and Kherson oblasts. According to Russian officials, these territories are now constitutionally part of Russia, and according to Russian law, negotiating their return would require changing the constitution itself. That's the legal and political reality Moscow has created for itself. Whether it's genuine or a negotiating tactic, it represents a massive obstacle to peace. According to reports emerging from diplomatic channels, here's what Russia is reportedly signaling. Potential willingness to withdraw from some areas of Kherson and Zaporizhzhia Oblast territories that Russia has struggled to fully control and that remain active combat zones. Potential willingness to discuss security arrangements that address some Ukrainian concerns. Potential willingness to engage in direct negotiations with Kyiv rather than demanding preconditions be met first. These signals, according to analysts, represent a shift from previous Russian positions, at least rhetorically. But the reports also make clear what Russia is not offering: any withdrawal from Crimea, which Russia annexed in 2014, any withdrawal from the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, any acceptance of Ukraine joining NATO, any admission of wrongdoing or agreement to war crimes accountability. These are the kinds of positions that Russia maintains when it believes time is on its side, when it thinks it can outlast Western support, when it calculates that Ukraine will eventually have no choice but to accept, when it wants to appear reasonable without actually compromising. According to diplomatic observers, Putin's partial offer is designed to achieve several goals simultaneously: put pressure on Ukraine to negotiate, create divisions among Western allies about how to respond, establish a narrative that Russia tried for peace but was rejected, test whether the new American administration will push Ukraine toward concessions. Whether this represents a genuine opening or a tactical maneuver remains unclear, but what is clear, according to officials, is that the gap between Russian demands and Ukrainian needs remains enormous. Ukraine's response to these signals has been consistent and firm. According to Ukrainian officials, any peace deal must respect Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, including all territories occupied since 2014. President Zelensky has repeatedly stated that Ukraine will not accept any agreement that rewards Russian aggression. According to statements from Kyiv, the principles are non-negotiable: no recognition of Russian territorial gains, security guarantees that actually provide protection, accountability for war crimes, return of all Ukrainian territory. These positions reflect not just government policy, but public opinion, according to polling conducted by reputable organizations. A significant majority of Ukrainians oppose territorial concessions to end the war. Support for continued fighting, while showing some decline due to war fatigue, remains substantial. For any Ukrainian leader, accepting the loss of Donbas would be politically devastating and potentially personally dangerous. According to analysts, Zelensky understands that his legitimacy depends on not being seen as the president who surrendered Ukrainian land. That creates a fundamental problem. Russia is offering a partial deal that Ukraine cannot accept. Ukraine is demanding full restoration that Russia will not provide, and according to diplomats familiar with the situation, neither side shows signs of fundamentally changing its position. The response from Western capitals has been careful. According to reports, the United States has encouraged both sides to engage in negotiations while publicly maintaining support for Ukrainian sovereignty. European allies have expressed similar positions supportive of talks but wary of pressuring Ukraine into unfavorable terms. The message from Washington and Brussels, according to officials, is nuanced. We support diplomacy. We support Ukraine's right to decide its own future. We will not impose a settlement, but we also cannot sustain support indefinitely. That last point, though rarely stated explicitly, hangs over every discussion. To understand why Donbas is so central to this conflict, we need to examine what it represents. According to historical and economic analysis, the Donbas region comprising Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts was historically Ukraine's industrial heartland. Coal mining, steel production, and heavy manufacturing made it economically vital. Before 2014, the region was home to approximately 6.5 million people. Many had cultural and linguistic ties to Russia, though the majority identified as Ukrainian citizens. The conflict in Donbas began in 2014, following Russia's annexation of Crimea. Russian-backed separatists, supported by Russian military personnel, seized control of parts of both oblasts. According to United Nations estimates, the fighting between 2014 and 2022 killed over 14,000 people and displaced more than 1 million. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion in February 2022, one stated objective was to liberate all of Donbas. That objective remains central to Russian war aims. According to Russian officials and state media, the Donbas is portrayed as historically Russian territory, populated by Russian speakers who wanted liberation from Ukrainian control. Ukraine and Western governments reject this narrative entirely. According to international legal experts, Russia's annexation of Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson oblasts in September 2022 violated international law and has been recognized by virtually no other country. The United Nations General Assembly voted overwhelmingly to condemn the annexations, but international condemnation hasn't changed Russian policy, according to Kremlin statements. These territories are now part of Russia forever. That word forever is the problem, because if Russia genuinely believes Donbas is permanently Russian, there's nothing to negotiate. And if Ukraine genuinely believes Donbas is permanently Ukrainian, there's nothing to concede. According to analysts, this is the core dilemma that no amount of diplomacy has yet resolved. And here's where the situation becomes even more complex. According to military analysts, the current front lines in Donbas have been relatively stable for months, with Russia making slow, costly gains but no major breakthroughs. Neither side appears capable of achieving decisive military victory. Russia has the advantage in manpower and artillery but faces logistical challenges and high casualty rates. Ukraine has the advantage in Western technology and defensive positions but faces ammunition shortages and mobilization difficulties. According to military experts, this stalemate could continue for years without political resolution. That reality shapes the diplomatic calculations. According to analysts, Putin's partial offer may reflect a recognition that Russia cannot achieve all its military objectives, but an unwillingness to admit that publicly. By offering to withdraw from some territories while keeping Donbas, Russia could claim victory domestically while ending a costly war. But according to the same analysts, Ukraine has little incentive to accept such a deal. From Kyiv's perspective, accepting Russian control of Donbas would reward aggression and encourage future attacks, abandon millions of Ukrainian citizens to Russian occupation, undermine Ukraine's long-term security and economic viability, set a precedent that borders can be changed by force. According to Ukrainian officials, these costs outweigh any benefits from ending the fighting. The question, according to observers, is whether that calculation will change. If Western support decreases significantly, Ukraine may face harder choices. If Russian pressure intensifies, the costs of continued war may grow. If domestic politics shift, leaders on both sides may seek exits. But according to current assessments, none of those conditions have been met, and so the deadlock continues. According to reports, the diplomatic activity surrounding these negotiations involves multiple actors. The United States has taken a leading role, with the Trump administration seeking to broker a deal. European allies, particularly France and Germany, have maintained parallel diplomatic tracks. Turkey has offered to host negotiations. As it did in the early months of the war, China has expressed interest in playing a mediating role, though both Ukraine and Western nations have been skeptical. According to diplomatic sources, each of these actors has different interests and priorities. Washington wants an end to the conflict that allows it to focus on other challenges. Europe wants stability on its eastern border and an end to the refugee and energy crises. Turkey wants to enhance its regional influence and maintain ties with both sides. China wants to demonstrate global leadership while supporting its strategic partner Russia. According to analysts, navigating these competing interests makes diplomacy even more complicated. Every proposal must satisfy multiple audiences. Every concession creates domestic political problems for someone. Every statement is analyzed for signals about future intentions. According to officials familiar with the process, this complexity is one reason progress has been so slow. It's not just Russia and Ukraine that need to agree. It's the entire international community that has a stake in the outcome. This isn't the first time peace has seemed possible only to collapse. According to documented records, in March 2022, negotiations in Istanbul reportedly came close to a framework agreement. According to some accounts, a deal involving Ukrainian neutrality and security guarantees was discussed. Those talks collapsed. The reasons remain disputed. Russia blames Ukraine and the West, while Ukraine blames Russian actions in Bucha and elsewhere. In late 2022 and throughout 2023, various diplomatic initiatives were launched. None produced results. In 2024, back-channel communications reportedly increased, but no formal negotiations occurred. According to historians who study conflict resolution, this pattern is common. Wars often see multiple failed peace attempts before finally ending. Each failure shapes the next attempt, creating both lessons and grievances. According to this perspective, the current impasse is neither surprising nor necessarily permanent, but it does suggest that peace remains distant. What makes this moment particularly significant is the pressure facing all parties. According to reports, Putin faces domestic challenges that may influence his calculations, economic strain from sanctions, though less severe than initially predicted, casualty figures that, while officially minimized, are substantial, questions about war, aims that have repeatedly shifted, elite tensions that, while suppressed, reportedly exist. According to analysts, Putin needs either victory or a face-saving exit. The partial offer may represent an attempt to achieve the latter while claiming the former. Meanwhile, according to reports, Zelensky faces his own pressures, war fatigue among a population that has endured 3 years of conflict, economic devastation that requires massive international support, military challenges including mobilization and ammunition supply, political uncertainty about continued Western backing. According to polling and expert analysis, Ukrainian resolve remains strong but not unlimited. The question, according to observers, is whether either leader can afford to compromise. According to their domestic political situations, the answer so far is no. According to official statements from key parties, the Kremlin has confirmed its willingness to negotiate but has not publicly detailed specific territorial proposals. Official Russian position remains that annexed territories are non-negotiable. Ukrainian officials have rejected any proposal that involves territorial concessions. According to Foreign Ministry statements, Ukraine's position on sovereignty is unchanged. The United States State Department has called for meaningful negotiations while affirming support for Ukrainian sovereignty. According to officials, Washington is not pressuring Kyiv to accept unfavorable terms. NATO has reiterated that Ukraine's future is for Ukraine to decide. According to alliance statements, member nations continue to provide military and economic support. This is diplomatic language for everyone supports talks, but no one agrees on terms. According to analysts, the gap between public positions and private discussions may be significant. What officials say publicly and what they discuss behind closed doors often differ, but according to available information, no breakthrough is imminent. According to recent statements, President Zelensky has addressed the peace process directly. He has reportedly stated that Ukraine is ready for diplomacy but not for capitulation. He has reportedly stated that any agreement must guarantee Ukraine's security, not just pause the fighting, and he has reportedly stated that the Ukrainian people, not foreign powers, will decide what terms are acceptable. These statements reflect a consistent message. Ukraine wants peace. Ukraine will not sacrifice sovereignty for peace. Ukraine expects its partners to understand the difference. According to observers, Zelensky is balancing competing pressures, maintaining Western support while preserving Ukrainian agency. That balance, according to analysts, is increasingly difficult. According to military reports, fighting continues even as diplomacy proceeds. Russian forces are pressing offensives in multiple sectors of the front line. Ukrainian forces are conducting defensive operations while also striking Russian logistics and infrastructure. Drone and missile attacks continue on both sides, according to officials. Neither side is reducing military pressure in anticipation of negotiations. This suggests, according to analysts, that both sides want to strengthen their battlefield position before any potential ceasefire. If talks do progress, according to military observers, the front lines at that moment will likely determine the territorial starting point that creates an incentive to keep fighting even while talking about peace. According to analysts, several scenarios are now possible. One is that negotiations progress slowly, with both sides testing each other's flexibility over months. Another is that talks collapse entirely, leading to renewed escalation. A third possibility is a partial agreement, perhaps a ceasefire without formal peace that freezes the conflict temporarily. According to experts, the third option may be most likely in the near term. It would allow both sides to claim they haven't conceded while stopping the killing. But according to critics, such an agreement would merely postpone the fundamental dispute. Donbas would remain contested. Russia would retain occupied territory. Ukraine would maintain its claim to sovereignty, and the potential for renewed fighting would persist. According to this view, partial peace is not real peace. It's a pause. What we're witnessing is a test of endurance and calculation. Russia wants to see if Ukraine and its allies will eventually accept terms Moscow can live with. Ukraine wants to see if continued resistance will eventually force Russia to withdraw. The West wants to see if diplomacy can succeed where military support has not achieved decisive results, and the world wants to know whether this war will end or simply continue indefinitely. The next months will determine which path emerges. According to the latest reports, diplomatic contacts continue. Officials indicate that discussions are ongoing, though details remain confidential. According to sources, both sides have agreed to maintain communication channels even as public rhetoric remains tough. That's significant, according to analysts, as long as communication continues. The possibility of progress exists, but according to the same sources, major obstacles remain: Donbas, NATO, Crimea, security guarantees, war crimes accountability. These issues have not been resolved, and according to officials, resolving them will require compromises that neither side has yet been willing to make. As this diplomatic process continues, the fundamental question remains unanswered. Can Russia and Ukraine find terms both can accept? According to current positions, the answer is no. Russia wants to keep Donbas. Ukraine wants it back. That gap has not closed. What happens next depends on whether either side changes its calculation. If battlefield dynamics shift dramatically, positions may change. If Western support changes dramatically, Ukraine's options may narrow. If Russian domestic politics change dramatically, Moscow's demands may soften. But according to current assessments, none of these shifts appears imminent, and so the war continues and the peace talks hang by a thread. And tonight, the world watches, diplomats meet, soldiers fight, and civilians wait. Because tonight, we're reminded of something fundamental. Peace requires compromise. Compromise requires trust. And trust, after 3 years of war, is in desperately short supply. Will Putin's offer lead anywhere? Will Ukraine bend? Will the West push harder? We don't know yet, but we do know this. The talking continues, the fighting continues, and the dying continues, until someone decides that enough is enough. This story is far from over, and we will be here, covering every development, until peace finally comes or hope finally fades.